In a basin south of downtown Durango, Colorado, archaeologists pulled 14,882 human bone fragments out of the ground between 2002 and 2005. At least 35 people. 2 stone axes nearby tested positive for human blood. That basin is now Lake Nighthorse, a reservoir with a swim beach, opened in 2018. Visitors cannot go past 25 feet beyond the waterline, a rule protecting more than 130 sites still buried around the shore. Southwest Colorado holds Canyons of the Ancients National Monument, 176,000 acres, the highest known density of archaeological sites in the country. Most of it sits within 90 minutes of a park 500,000 people visit and never see. 10 of these places made this list. We start at number 10, at that same basin. A lake with a lifeguard on duty, sitting on the largest mass grave ever excavated in the American Southwest. Stay until number 3. Archaeologists there spent 9 seasons digging up an 800-year-old village, then buried it again on purpose, and left something behind for whoever digs next. If you're drawn to places people drive past without knowing what's underneath them, subscribe. Today we're counting down 10 things scientists found in Mesa Verde country. Number 10. Sacred Ridge. The village they put a swim beach on. Start with the parking lot. Paddleboards stacked against a rental shed, a lifeguard chair, families carrying coolers down to a swim beach on a calm, ordinary-looking reservoir, the kind you'd pass on a drive without a second thought. Nothing about the shoreline tells you that you are standing 2 miles from downtown Durango, on top of the largest deposit of mutilated human remains ever excavated in the American Southwest. This is Ridge's Basin, now called Lake Nighthorse. Between 2002 and 2005, archaeologists from SWCA Environmental Consultants worked here ahead of a federal water project, digging under contract to the Ute Mountain Ute tribe. They investigated 74 sites and recovered over 200,000 artifacts. One feature, at Site 5LP245, produced 14,882 human bone fragments, the remains of at least 35 people, infants through adults. Crushed skulls, scalping, eye gouging, dismemberment, bodies scattered through several pit structures. 2 stone axes recovered from the site tested positive for human blood. The site had been settled in the late 600s by farmers who were not one people. The pottery, the house styles, the burial customs, all of it points to at least 3 distinct groups sharing the same small basin. Around AD 800, one of those groups was destroyed. Chemical analysis of the victims' bones showed they had grown up right there, in or near the basin, which rules out an invading army from somewhere else. The people who did this were neighbors. Lead excavator Jason Chwipka put it plainly. It was entirely an inside job. His colleague James Potter added that everything about the deposit pointed to a rapid, coordinated event, the kind of violence that only happens with complicity from within the community itself. By AD 850, the entire Durango area was empty. 12 centuries later, the federal government needed somewhere to put a dam. The Colorado Ute Indian Water Rights Settlement Act put it across this exact basin. The tribes hired the archaeologists. The archaeologists dug for 4 seasons, reburied what they found, and in 2011 the water came up behind a dam 270 feet high. In 2018, the reservoir opened to the public. There is a rule now, posted at the gate. Stay within 25 feet of the high water line. A reclamation manager admitted on the record that he does not expect everyone to follow it. The swim beach has hours, and a lifeguard, and children in the shallow end on a summer afternoon. Nobody at the ticket booth is going to mention what is underneath them. Number 9. Cowboy Wash, the proof in the hearth. 15 miles west of Mesa Verde, on Ute Mountain Ute land, there is a hearth that produced the only chemical proof of cannibalism ever recovered in the American Southwest. The site is called Cowboy Wash, officially 5MT10010, and it sits on some of the harshest ground anyone in this region ever tried to farm. No stream runs there year-round. Rain alone will not raise corn. The people who lived there depended on floodwater running off Sleeping Ute Mountain, and they lasted roughly 1 generation. In the 1990s, archaeologists working ahead of a tribal irrigation project excavated the site as salvage, not as research. What they found stopped the project cold. In 2 adjacent pit houses, they recovered the remains of 7 people, 4 adults and an adolescent in one, 2 children in the other, showing cut marks, percussion scars, and burn patterns consistent with butchering and cooking while the bodies still had flesh on them. Across 4 sites in the wider community, at least 35 people were processed the same way, all around AD 1150, in the middle of the drought that also brought down the Chaco system to the south. Then came the detail that made this a landmark case rather than another disputed bone pile. In the cold ash of a pithouse hearth, excavators found a human coprolite. Lab analysis identified human myoglobin inside it, a protein found only in skeletal and cardiac muscle. The same protein turned up on sherds of a cooking pot. It did not appear in storage vessels at the site, and it did not appear in cooking pots from any site occupied before the drought. The paper ran in Nature in September 2000. Other archaeologists challenged it in print. The original team answered, point by point, and the finding held. Here's the detail that stops people cold. Whoever left that coprolite in the hearth did it in the house where the bodies had just been prepared. Lead researcher Brian Billman called it the ultimate insult, the final gesture of contempt toward a household that no longer existed to be insulted. Nobody resettled Cowboy Wash. The site is closed tribal land today, reburied with no tour route anywhere near it. What survives isn't a wall or a bone. It's what somebody left in a fire pit 900 years ago and never came back to clean up. Number 8. Gladstone, the ghost town that turned a river yellow. Gladstone died once, quietly, from a fire nobody remembers the date of. Then, more than a century later, it killed a river in 9 days flat. The town sat at the head of Cement Creek above Silverton, built around the Gold King mine after Olaf Nelson found ore there in 1887. It had a post office, an 80-stamp mill, a short-lived railroad up from Silverton. Fire took the surface plant sometime in the early 1900s. The exact year is disputed, and the town emptied out within a few seasons. That should have been the end of the story. The mine, however, kept draining. On August 5, 2015, a crew working for the Environmental Protection Agency put heavy equipment into the collapsed portal of the Gold King mine, trying to reach and treat the water backed up inside it. They misjudged how much was standing behind the rock. 3 million gallons of acid mine drainage broke loose in a single afternoon, carrying lead, arsenic, cadmium, and more than 880,000 pounds of dissolved metal down Cement Creek and into the Animas River. The water ran orange through Silverton, through Durango, out of Colorado, down through New Mexico, and into the San Juan River. It reached Lake Powell inside of 2 weeks. Here's the thing almost nobody says out loud about it. The spill was not exceptional. It was just visible. A longtime coordinator of the local river stakeholders group has said on the record that the Upper Animas watershed releases roughly 1 Gold King spill's worth of water and metal every week or two, depending on the season, and has done for decades. The 2015 event simply happened where a camera crew and a federal agency both stood watching. The Navajo Nation settled its claim against the EPA for $31 million in 2022. A Superfund cleanup covering 48 mine sites is still running above Silverton, roughly half finished after 10 years, and something like $140 million. There is no ghost town left to walk through at Gladstone. There is a water treatment plant standing on the site, running around the clock, trying to clean up what the town left behind after it stopped existing. Number 7. McPhee. The town built to die. McPhee was designed to die. That was not an accident of bad planning. It was the plan. In 1924, the New Mexico Lumber Company built a mill town in the Dolores River Valley and calculated in advance how many years it would take to cut the surrounding forest. They built the town to match that number. 18 years. Housing, a store, a church, more than 40 miles of narrow-gauge railroad, all of it built with an expiration date already attached. For a few years in the mid-1920s, it worked spectacularly. In 1925 alone, McPhee produced 61% of Colorado's entire annual lumber output. It became the largest town in Montezuma County. The forest ran out roughly on schedule. Houses were jacked up and hauled away to be reused elsewhere. Fire finished the mill in January 1948, and the town had outlived its planned lifespan by only 6 years. Nobody rebuilt it. That would have been a tidy, forgettable ending, except the federal government wanted the same valley for a damn 3 decades later. The Bureau of Reclamation bought out the land in the 1970s and, before flooding it, funded one of the largest archaeological rescue projects in American history, 5 times its usual archaeology budget, more than $1 million on computer time alone, generating over 70 million individual pieces of data to record a valley about to disappear underwater. More than 1,000 ancient sites were recorded. 95 were excavated, producing over 1 million artifacts before the water came up. The dam went up in 1983 and 1984. The reservoir now holds 381,000 acre-feet, and the McPhee town site sits somewhere underneath it. What comes up at low water are old pre-dam irrigation canals, not the town itself. The houses were physically hauled off before the flooding, so there is less down there to find than you'd expect. Above the shoreline at the visitor center that now curates that entire rescued collection stand 2 pueblos named for the Spanish friars who first wrote about ruins in this valley in July of 1776, a full century and a half before any of this ever happened. A place engineered to have a countdown clock got a second one it never saw coming. The forest ran out first. Then decades later, so did the valley. Number 6. Falls Creek Rock Shelters, The Girl in the Glass Case. In August 1937, 2 amateur diggers named Helen Sloan Daniels and Zeke Flora opened a crevice in a sandstone cliff north of Durango and found bodies that had not decayed. Skin intact, hair intact, 2,000 years old. They carried them down the slope and gave them names. One woman, 19 or 20 years old when she died, wrapped in a small yucca fiber apron, cause of death unknown. They called Esther. The Carnegie Institution's Earl Morris arrived the following year, bought Flora's entire collection for $500, and dug the rest of the site so quickly that grave goods were separated from the bodies they belonged to. Skulls were shipped east to Harvard. Esther went to the Mesa Verde Museum instead, because the Carnegie Institution decided it was the scientific institution nearest to what they called her original home. She went into a glass case in 1939. Visitors looked at her for more than 3 decades. Then, sometime in the early 1970s, museums stopped displaying human remains, and she went into a drawer instead. In total, federal records certify 49 individuals and over 1,200 funerary objects recovered from the site. Woven textiles, baskets, beadwork, cordage made from human hair. In 1997, tribal representatives gave the Forest Service their answer about whether the shelters should ever be reopened for study or tourism. 4 words. Leave the dead alone. Esther was reburied in 2013 at a location that has never been made public under Hopi and Tacoma oversight. The shelters sit at the base of a sandstone cliff, 2 alcoves large enough to hold a village, with rock art still visible on the back walls that nobody has painted over or cleaned up. None of that is why the site is remembered. The shelters are closed today, and closed for good. The Forest Service says plainly that there are no trails inside the conservation area anymore. The path that once led up to the cliff has simply disappeared, reclaimed by grass and time, the way the rest of it eventually was, too. Number 5. Ute Mountain Tribal Park, 30 people a day. There is a second Mesa Verde, and almost nobody has heard of it. It sits directly across the boundary from the national park, on Ute Mountain Ute land, along 25 miles of the Mancos River. It covers 125,000 acres, roughly 2.5 times the size of the park next door, and holds cliff dwellings that have never been reconstructed, stabilized only enough to keep from collapsing. There is no running water anywhere inside it, no electricity, no restrooms, 1 graded dirt road. Mesa Verde National Park drew over 500,000 visitors in 2024. The tribal park caps non-tribal visitors at 30 people a day. Here's the wild part. This was a deliberate choice made by one man. In the late 1960s, Chief Jack House, the last traditional chief of the Utes, proposed opening the land as a tribal park run entirely on the tribe's own terms. Ute guides only, no self-guided visits, no reconstruction, no infrastructure. It was not a popular idea within the tribe at the time. Guided tours began in 1972, the year after his death, and the park has been run exactly that way ever since. To go, you meet a guide at a highway junction south of Cortez, then drive 40 miles of rutted dirt to reach ladders leading down into cliff dwellings nobody has touched since the people who built them left. Professional photography requires tribal permission. There is no food, no water, and no cell service. The park's own director has said it best. It stays primitive because that is exactly how the tribe's leaders wanted it kept. A second Mesa Verde exists, in plain sight, and the reason almost nobody visits it is that somebody decided, on purpose, that almost nobody should. If you're finding this interesting, drop a thumbs up and let us know in the comments which one of these has surprised you the most so far. We read everyone. Number 3 is still coming. That's the one I mentioned at the start. Number 4, Chimney Rock, the building that is the observation. Once every 18.5 years, in southern Colorado, the moon rises in a gap between two rock spires that are only about 40 feet apart. 1,000 years ago, somebody built a great house on the one patch of ground where you can watch it happen. The site is Chimney Rock, in Archuleta County, a Chacoan outlier roughly 100 miles north of Chaco Canyon itself. The Great House Pueblo sits on a narrow mesa nearly 1,000 feet above the valley floor, an exposed, uncomfortable place to live and a perfect place to stand and watch a fixed point in the sky. Tree ring dates from the roof beams put construction at AD 1076, with more building in 1093. Both years land on what astronomers call the Northern Major Lunar Standstill. The Forest Service is careful here, and worth quoting exactly. They cannot prove the Great House was built specifically to celebrate the moon, but they believe the people at Chimney Rock were sky watchers. One archaeoastronomer has gone further, arguing the walls also align to the summer solstice sunrise, and to the point in the sky where a supernova appeared in 1054, bright enough by some accounts to be seen in daylight. The generation that cut those roof beams in 1076 would have been the children of the people who watched that light appear. The most recent standstill ran through 2024 and 2025. The monument held its last public viewing events that October. If you didn't make it, the next one is 2043. It is a strange kind of building to leave behind. Not a monument to an event, but an instrument built to keep measuring one, on a schedule longer than most human lives, whether or not anyone is still there to read it. Number 3. Sand Canyon Pueblo. They dug it up, then put it back. Archaeologists spent 9 field seasons digging up a 420-room village at Sand Canyon Pueblo. Then they filled the whole thing back in. This is Canyons of the Ancients National Monument, west of Cortez, 176,000 acres holding the highest known density of archaeological sites anywhere in the country. Sand Canyon Pueblo was one of the last big villages built here before the region emptied out in the late 1200s. 90 kivas, 14 towers, a plaza, home to somewhere around 400 to 600 people. Crow Canyon Archaeological Center excavated it across 9 seasons in the 1980s and 90s. Then they hit the problem every Southwest dig eventually hits. An exposed masonry wall starts collapsing the moment you uncover it, and stabilizing it means rebuilding something the original builders never built. So the team did the opposite. They lined every excavated trench with landscape fabric, so a future dig would know exactly where their own work stopped. They refilled the kivas. They capped the surface with the same rubble they had removed, turning each stone lichen side up so it would weather back to its original color. Within 2 or 3 years, it looked untouched again. And here's the payoff. Before they walked away, the crew left markers behind. Empty aluminum soft drink cans, each one usually holding a contemporary penny, placed on structure floors and inside hearths. A message in a can, for whoever digs here next, telling them exactly where the 20th century stopped and the 13th century starts. Today you walk a short loop past rubble mounds and a handful of interpretive signs, and you see almost nothing. The most thoroughly excavated village in the entire monument is the one that shows you the least, because the people who dug it up decided the ground deserved to look undisturbed again, penny and all. Number 2. Dunton. $2 a week. Dunton sits on the west fork of the Dolores River, a gold and silver camp founded in 1885 around a set of hot springs. Like most camps here, it died when the ore ran out, essentially deserted by 1918. What makes it unusual is what happened after. The same cabins that rented for $1 or $2 a week to hippies and traveling musicians in the 1970s now cost up to $3,000 a night. A German industrialist's heir bought the whole town. It became a cattle ranch, then a dude ranch, then a stop for bikers passing through the San Juans, then, by the 1970s, a soft landing for anyone drifting through the mountains looking for cheap rent, and no rules. It emptied out again by 1990. In 1994, Christoph Henkel, a German investor and art dealer, bought the entire 183-acre town site. Instead of tearing it down, he restored the original cabins, hauled in more historic cabins from elsewhere in Colorado to fill the gaps, and left the old saloon standing exactly where it was, bar and all. That bar carries carved names in the wood, and the resort tells guests one of them belongs to Butch Cassidy, cut in after the 1889 bank robbery in nearby Telluride. It is a good story. It is also, as far as anyone can find, entirely unsupported outside the resort's own telling. No scholar, no newspaper, no forensic analysis backs it up. One popular version of the tale even puts Sundance at the bar with him, which is flatly impossible. The two men did not meet until 7 years later. The carving is real. The name on it is a house tradition wearing history's clothes. The arc of the place is the better story anyway. Ghost town, ranch, biker stop, commune, ghost town again, $3,000 a night resort, and somewhere in the middle of all that, somebody carved a name into a bar top and let the legend do the rest of the work for free. There was, for 2 decades, a pinto bean queen. She wore a red velvet cape. Number 1, Dove Creek. Somewhere special. Dove Creek sits out near the Utah line, incorporated in 1939, population 635 and shrinking since a peak of 986 in 1960. It was settled by World War I veterans who were handed sagebrush flats and discovered, through decades of what one historical marker calls backbreaking hand-to-hand combat with the brush, that the one thing this ground would grow without irrigation was pinto beans. In 1946, the town had grown enough to take the county seat away from Rico, up in the mountains, simply by having more people left in it. So the town leaned all the way in. It declared itself the pinto bean capital of the world. Through the 1950s and 60s, it crowned a pinto bean queen every year in a recipe contest, complete with a silver trophy, a bouquet, and that cape, and it published the winner's recipes in a cookbook that is still sold today at the bean mill on the edge of town. The contest is gone now. The town's other tradition is not. Every 4th of July, Dove Creek runs the Pick and Hoe, a parade, a rock drilling contest for the old mining families, pit barbecued meat, fireworks, and, at 2 o'clock sharp, a pig chase through the park. It has run since roughly the mid-1950s. One Denver magazine noted that the town's welcome sign, which once bragged about the beans, now reads simply, "Somewhere Special." 3 bean elevators still stand on the edge of town, processing about 3 million pounds of dryland pinto beans in an average year. They grow beans, they chase a pig once a year, and they let a sign that used to boast just tell the truth instead. That's a lower bar than most places clear, and Dove Creek clears it without trying. This part of Colorado does not ease you into anything. It starts with a mass grave under a swim beach and ends with a pig chase. For me, it's Sand Canyon, Pueblo. Archaeologists burying a penny in an 800-year-old hearth, on purpose, as a note to whoever digs next. Let us know in the comments which of these 10 surprised you most. If this is the kind of history you're after, subscribe. There are places just like these in every state.